No, he became an angel investor and was the founding member of the Mid-Atlantic Angels. All along, Mark has had a strong interest and passion in writing. And we'll get into that in a little bit. But what was so beautiful is when he and I were having one of our lunches together, we began talking about the parallels between becoming an author, becoming a published author, and how that relates to business. And one of the things that he said, Chris, is I had to come back to my entrepreneurial roots, and I had to begin doing the things that I've been coaching and training and teaching people for years how to do. So that having been said, Mark is now a published author, which we're thrilled with. His first novel is on the market as we speak, and he has, I think, a total of 5 additional novels that the majority of which are complete, but they're in the process of going through the editing, the publishing, etc. But we'll get into that. With that, I would like to introduce you to Mr. Mark Greathouse, also fondly referred to as Tumbleweed.
All right, Tumbleweed.
Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you.
You and I go back a ways.
Yes, it's true. In a good way.
I'd like to think so. But then again, you wouldn't tell anybody if I first met Mark when I was with another startup.
Yep.
Yeah. We were one of the 99.9%. We failed. But not before. We had an opportunity to engage Mark on a number of levels, including his services as a coach and an advisor, and also allowed us the opportunity to pitch in front of the Mid-Atlantic Angels. We went on to raise a funding round. Unfortunately, as with 99.9% of all startups, we couldn't scale. And so as a result, it was a terrible solution, but we had to close the company down. And I think it was because of that, Mark said, forget all this stuff. I'm going to go back to doing what I love to do, which is writing. So that having been said, kind of walk us through your career and experience.
The Odyssey, yes. First place, as an author and as a Western author, here I be. This is the company, but we'll get to that. No, I started coming out of college and got into the corporate world right away. Actually, and I noticed I'm holding the product. Got that marketing.
Stop. I want to add, let's do something. I want you to hold that up and ask them how do they pronounce that.
Yeah, can you pronounce that? Oasis, sí, en español.
Yeah.
It means nuts. Mm-hmm. Oasis River, Oasis Strip, Oasis Bay. Yeah, Oasis. All right.
Good. That's better than the Frederick chapter did.
Yeah. Anyway, so got into government professional services contracting, and honestly, I had been an English major in college. How's that? And so I got into tech manuals. It was wonderful. Shoot, one of the highlights was I got a ride on a Polaris ballistic missile submarine. What a trip, man. Whew. Got to fly in planes. They were running sonar tests. I mean, all kinds of very cool experiences. I loved it, but I very quickly realized that my heart was, I tended to gravitate towards managing things. And I wanted to take this, I eventually built this publications operation. I had about 60 people working for me. And it was full service, providing technical support to our government contracts for this large contractor. And I said, boy, I could do this a lot less expensively. Let's get out of this type A office space, this Class A stuff, lower the overhead, all that kind of stuff. So I put together my first strategic business plan. And I mean, I really delved into this thing. I went to the conference board and got sample plans, and I'm getting up on it. And I submitted it to the company, and they said, wow, this is really cool. But we already got an operation down in the headquarters that does this kind of thing, and you're just East Coast operations, and nah, we don't want to do that. But we like what you did. Do you think you might be able to put together a plan for our East Coast operations? Wow. So that was kind of the beginning of the next rung, if you will, on the ladder. And for anyone who does corporate business, strategic business planning, even in large corporations, it's not really a full-time gig unless you are sandbagging along the way somehow, frankly. You're basically a coordinator. You're pulling disparate operations within the corporation together to pull together a plan. So I very quickly got into other things that actually got into marketing, public affairs, public relations. I headed the corporate political action committee, collecting contributions to make to politicians in the various and sundry locations where we had facilities. A lot of fun. Got to meet some really cool people. Got to go down on Capitol Hill. Tremendous connections. And I did this for a couple decades, and I said, this has been fun, but it's not really my cup of tea. And so I got into entrepreneuring, and that was a fascinating awakening. Connected, I leveraged some of my connections, and actually we had one. It was called a Gridlock Survival Kit. Ultimately it didn't go anywhere, but it took advantage of this horrendous traffic down around Washington, D.C., and the Beltway and all that. And it was a kit that you got in your car, and it had an elastic device for doing, and instructions on exercising. It had some music cassette tapes. That's how long it was ago. It had a book that came with it that had cartoons and humor books. It was a real trip. We were planning to market it at gift shops, and we just ran out of gas. But it was really cool to do. A lot of fun. We had mock-up point of sale stuff and all that. We had a business plan, of course. But I really kind of got into a whole bunch of different businesses. And then the great eye-opener was I got involved with some folks who put together the very first online private equity marketplace where investors and entrepreneurs could get together online in a secure environment where they could control access. And it was a fabulous experience. It got me into an organization called MindShare down there in the DC area. Anyone familiar with that? All right. That's been going on. I was in the first class in 1997. All right. So if you can imagine, they have anywhere from 40 to 60 people go through that program every year. So you can begin to imagine the network of entrepreneurs. These are supposed to be promising executives in the entrepreneurial areas. So it's really cool. So it's a phenomenal opportunity. It was actually put together by the president at the time from NASDAQ. Anyway, all those connections I was able to leverage into this online private equity thing. That went down in the tech crash of 2000. We tried to reposition it, didn't work out. So there I was, doing a little consulting, doing business plans for people, doing marketing, advising. It was fun. By the way, at that point I had a family. My wife and I had started a lot of additional responsibilities to worry about, and then I started Mid-Atlantic Angels down in Frederick. That was a lot of fun. We invested about $1.5 million in half a dozen companies. We looked at dozens and dozens and dozens. I've probably in my life seen 1,000+ business plans, and I've written, getting up well into 3 figures of the number, in terms of the number of plans I've done. A lot of fun, very satisfying. Some of them work, but it all boils down to the people, and we'll get into some of that. So that brings me, we actually officially shut down Mid-Atlantic Angels last December. Frankly, we weren't getting the investor interest, and we weren't getting the right quality of entrepreneurs. And you know, that's kind of a death knell to any of that kind of organization. So what do you do next? Well, I had been increasingly writing, and I just went full bore. My wife says, okay, go for it. And I had been doing, that's warm, isn't it? I've been doing some digging. I was telling somebody earlier, I've got a file about yay thick with agent and publisher rejection letters. And I got this shelf with books that I've written that are never going to see a publisher. It's all part of learning, though, the experience of developing your craft. And I'm constantly learning. I went to Western genre, and I don't know, you want me to move on into that?
Before you do,
All right.
I've got some questions. So you've been writing for quite some time.
Longer than most of you probably ever figured. I started in high school a long time ago.
You had mentioned many times in our conversation, you did a lot of poetry,
Yep.
writing of poetry.
Yep.
Which you don't necessarily equate poetry with a Texas cowboy.
Painting with words.
Painting with words. So, had you had the gnawing feeling that you ultimately wanted to just get into doing writing full time, or what was the aha moment, whether it was sudden or gradual? What happened outside of the fact that Mid-Atlantic Angels went bye-bye?
When the publisher said, "We like that," that was pretty aha. The inspirations that make you. I mean, an ultimate decision to go full time is stepping off the deep end. My wife says, "Okay, we're going to make this investment," and it is an investment, as any entrepreneurial venture is. But I was telling somebody earlier, my very first moment that I said, I really want to do this at some point in my life, was 1981 or 2. It was when On Fire of the Vanities came out, Thomas Wolfe, and I went to one of his talks down at the Omni Shore Hotel in Washington, D.C. And there he is, standing there with his 3-piece linen suit, his white fedora, and he's got 300 people sitting there in rapt attention. And I went, there but for the grace of God go I want to be that at that podium. So, that was inspiration.
Yeah.
Okay. So tell us about the book, about your plans, about what's coming down the road, to give them a sense of what you've chosen to bite off and try to do.
Well, I have a business plan, I have a marketing plan, I have the financials. Waiting for royalty checks. First book came out at the end of July. There's a period before they can begin to reconcile book sales and stuff. I have a rough idea of what sales are, but it's only rough. There's all kinds of stuff coming up early next year that I'm like, been nominated for a couple things, and we'll see. But basically I got into Western genre. I have very much been embedded in and got involved in my family history. It was 5 brothers that immigrated from Ireland starting in 1845, and in old County Kildare, and escaping the potato famine and the oppression by the British. And they wound up settling in South Texas. The first one got there and said, the land of milk and honey, and the others followed, and the Corpus Christi area. He didn't talk about the rattlesnakes and the mosquitoes and whatever. And they left Ireland forever and established their lives in Texas. The first one actually fought with Zachary Taylor in Mexican-American War. And they had I had the great fortune that they wrote this stuff down. They left family histories that were filed with the Texas Historical Society. So I'm like, whoa, this is great. And anyone who's done family trees, you go, oh, this is really cool, particularly when you can get newspaper articles and you get to a library and you get into archives and things like that. So I had all this material and all these people willing to talk with me and share family information. And then you start really ramping it up, and it was a natural fallout then to do historical fiction. I was a history minor, English major history minor. And I should back up. I got to be an English major after 2 years of struggling to be a biological sciences major because I refused to be an English major. And when University of Maryland said, end of the second semester, you've been having too much fun in the fraternity, see ya. And I almost got sent over to Southeast Asia. I said, that's the end of that. And so I got to be an English major and actually graduated. It worked out quite well. Had a couple job offers when I got out. And there you go. But anyhow, so again, writing has just been part and parcel of Western genre. I love it. I'm actually, right now I'm working, I've got cousins down there who are ranchers. They're raising cattle. I've got one cousin who's got a ranch in the family since 1853. It's the same property. It's in San Diego, Texas, near, about an hour west of Corpus Christi. So, you know, it's just exciting. And these guys and women, they had big families for the most part. They fought Comanche, they fought Kiowa, they fought Apache, they fought Mexicans, they bandits. I mean, it's stuff that most people today couldn't begin to imagine carving a life out of that environment. And I tried to communicate that. My thematic that runs through my books is the protagonist is a Texas Ranger captain who I take his surname is the family immigrant name. It's Dunn. It's, by the way, in Irish, it's brown hair. Anyway, he's the protagonist through all the books, and he's trying to bring justice, and he also looks for a little thing called redemption, which really takes kind of a special point of view, if you will. So that's the basic theme. It's based on actual history. I use some historical characters. I use historical settings. If you went down to the Nueces Strip of Texas right now, you'll probably find a half dozen historical markers that have my family name on them, which is kind of exciting in and of itself. You wish, you know, there's and north of, Chris and I have talked about this, north of Corpus Christi, there's a refinery owned by Valera. It's huge. That's sitting on property that my great-great-grandfather owned. Dang it.
All right, so you ramped up the idea of writing. You ramped up the idea of writing professionally.
Yep.
For money.
Absolutely.
Okay. Walk us through the first steps that you took yourself through to attempt to validate your assumptions and whether or not you had material that might be of interest to others, because you're writing, and you know, in the traditional entrepreneurship paradigm, it's all about finding a problem, finding a big problem that a lot of people have, finding a big problem that a lot of people have, and the existing solutions are not that good, etc., etc. So how do you take that paradigm against writing, especially, and talk about the competitive nature of writing?
Okay, let's start with, there's well over 1,000 new book titles coming out every day.
Every day.
Every day.
In this country only?
Yep. And you've got, and then in my genre, Western, you know, I've got, I mean, dozens and dozens and dozens of authors, hundreds of them. How do you differentiate? So that's a huge thing. First place, you immerse, you read. I mean, I'm a voracious reader anyway. I'm usually got 2 or 3 books going simultaneously. Some of them are fiction, some nonfiction, whatever. But I think you read William Johnstone, Louis L'Amour, and Zane Grey, Larry McMurtry, and Janet Deal. Oh, one day my wife came home. She said, "You might be interested in this," and it's one of these romance novels written by a woman, a female author. And I went, okay. Well, it's another perspective, but what it helps do is it helps you when you're writing to provide some better connection and connectivity with your characters. Well, in fact, the first book, when the editor was reading it, she says, "Oh, who are you writing this for?" I said, "Man," I said, "that's who usually reads Western genre." She says, "Oh no, honey, women are gonna love this." She's from Kansas. Anyway, I said, "Okay, I'll take your word for that." So, and I've got some good, very strong, good, solid women characters. It's so I'm reading all these other books. I found what I liked and didn't like. Like, if you know, familiar with Larry McMurtry, he wrote Last Picture Show. He wrote Lonesome Dove, a bunch of other books. But Louis L'Amour, he wrote 109 novels in his lifetime. Well, I started a little late. I'm not going to get to 109, but I'm working. I'm going to get as fast as I can. The Tumbleweed sagas are probably ultimately going to cap out at about 7 books. I just finished the 5th this weekend. And the publisher is committed to publishing every 6 months. So I'm into Western genre. I am steeped in it. I've studied it. I was thinking about props today. I brought the book. I got a Tumbleweed. I got a Colt 1851 Navy revolver. It's a copy. It's not a real firing weapon. But I've got my office decorated so it channels the inner cowboy. Okay, and it's what you do. If you're an entrepreneur, guess what? You eat, sleep, and live. If you're not putting out, I've got a cafe owner who is wanting to take me on as a mentor. He's gonna give me a few bucks a month to let him bend my ear and give him some advice. But he and his fiance are each putting in about 80 hours a week on the coffee business. Anyone here know what the margin is on a cup of coffee? It almost puts booze to shame. 70%. Yeah. So, it's kind of, it's cool stuff. But in books and publications, when you're trying to project, well, how many books can I sell? You're looking for a publisher, you're going to appreciate this, that is going to deliver the marketplace. They've got the connections. You're going to be in the appropriate catalogs. You're going to be pushed. You're going to be pushed to do interviews. I mean, I've had 3 or 4 television interviews since the book came out in July. Press interviews, podcasts. I mean, it's been fun. This has been great. I'm grateful to Chris for it. But you go into this with malice aforethought that this is how you're going to do it. So I'm looking for the same as an entrepreneur. I'm looking. I got the 4 P's: product, price, place, and promotion. So the books. I'm the business, okay, and I just haven't figured out how I can keep a horse up here real handy. It's a hassle.
We'll figure it out.
Okay. It's cleaning up after it in the house. But so I got the products, the books. The publisher, I mean, they got the first book and they went, wow, this is really cool. And what do you think the publisher's next question is? What else you got? They don't want to be one trick pony. Okay? Good.
A couple of questions I want to dig into. Okay. You had Oasis Justice
Yep.
underway. You had a general plan.
Yep.
Okay. When did you approach your publishers? And how many publishers did you approach? And what were the criteria that that publisher who accepted you demanded of you before he'd even think about it?
All right. First, let me say the publisher is a self-made entrepreneur. He didn't graduate, doesn't have a college degree. He built software that's used widely as billing software for the telecommunications industry. And so he's a multi-millionaire from that. Has a great branch north of Houston. Great guy. And I think part of it we hit off on the entrepreneurial side and the investing side. But my journey to get to the publisher was kind of unusual because I've gone the route of going to the publishers and the agents, and yeah, quite a journey. And I'm getting ready, and incidentally, we'll talk about it at the end. I'm getting ready to write a spec script for a screenplay, so this is going to be fascinating, a whole other world. Anyway, so I was doing research, and I was looking at the war between the states. Down in Texas, they don't call it the Civil War, it's a war between the states. I was looking at secession and all the Supreme Court decisions and all the legal stuff that went around that. And then I wound up getting connected to an organization down in Texas that was promoting secession. And I'm like, okay, this is kind of interesting. And so I should say I also had written a novel about Texas seceding. So it was part of my research for that, and which they did successfully, by the way, in the novel. 10th largest economy in the world. So the person who headed that organization said, "So you write?" And I went, "Oh yeah," because I connected with the person, and they said, "Well, we got somebody you ought to meet." And so I got connected to this publisher and this entrepreneur, and we hit it off personally, but this was about a year and a half, almost 2 years before Oasis Justice got published. It was the mating dance, if you will.
As I was studying, is your experience of, I won't call it shotgunning, your novel to, a lot of different publishers and getting rejected, but you took a fairly broad approach, right?
Right.
Okay. Then you turn around and you, by connection, by relationship building, you were able to get much farther along in your journey than, and I say that because that directly correlates to we entrepreneurs and one of the fatal mistakes we make, and that is we take a shotgun approach to everything, whether that's going after every Tom, Dick, and Harry as a potential customer and not focusing, number one, or number two, going out and blanketing anybody that they think might be a venture capitalist or an angel, and thinking that they've got the greatest thing since sliced bread. And none of that is really, that's the wrong approach. It's about focus. It's about relationship building.
I should say I never shotgun.
Okay.
Even when you look for agents and publishers, they all have specialty areas, and that's what you look for. So if you've got an interest area, you can reject all the other agents and publishers. It's a wild goose chase. That would be shotgun for sure.
Okay.
It's like too that your networking becomes vitally important. I always ask entrepreneurs, who their mentors are, who their advisors are. Because if they're off doing it, one or two of them doing it by themselves, I'm not gonna invest in them. I wouldn't advise investing in them. The first thing that I think is, well, if they're not out there with good advisors to learn from, why is that? Are they teachable? Are they gonna follow advice? So that becomes really important. But I was focused in, and I just lucked out after, I mean, it had been, I guess, 2007, I published a novel for teens, and it was well received, but every once in a while it sells something on Amazon. But I didn't really go after publishers until the Nueces Justice happened. And actually I had 3 in the can when I first approached the publisher, plus the secession book and a biography of my great-great-grandfather, who had an incredibly exciting life in South Texas. So it was really a lot more focused than many, and I think I find the successful entrepreneurs often, as you're suggesting, rather than shotgunning, you laser focus in on a genre. As soon as you divert your attention to something else, if it's swerves off your path, you're flirting with fire. One of the investments that I'm fortunately in right now, partly through no fault of their own, but partly through decisions they made, are going down the tubes. A very worthy enterprise, but they weren't able to adapt to certain things, and it had to do with losing the initial focus. I went back and reread their initial plan, and I thought, wow, if they'd stuck to that, but they did. And as an investor, you're not necessarily, unless you're sitting on the board, you're generally not in a position to have any clout, if you will, in making decisions.
How would you relate your experience working with your publisher versus your experience as an entrepreneur attempting to get investors? Are there corollaries?
Oh boy. Well, the publisher's going to make an investment in you as an author, and so you've done that. Once they've committed to you, you've got a signed contract. I've got a book coming out every 6 months from a commitment from the publisher, and they get rights to any media that my books come out in. So if we're fortunate enough to get a movie, for example, well, I get a royalty on it, of course, which is, I negotiated well. But I don't know how much of that answers what you're looking for.
I guess putting it simply, courting a venture capitalist, courting an angel investor. Would you say that courting a publisher is similar to courting an investor?
Yeah, you've got to make the sale. You've got a plan. You've got a vision, a mission. You've got some core values. One of the things I liked about my publisher, it's Defiance Press and Publishing, by the way, down in Little Conroe, Texas, Northeast. Is they publish nonfiction, principled fiction, which had an appeal to me, and children's books. They had 3 divisions. And I like the principle because I should say my wife is a librarian for teen, and she gets to review all of the books and is horrified at some of what's being preached to our youth. Let's put it that way. So it was very important. So having that connection with the when you're going to talk to, let me back up. When you're talking to investors, you're looking for a connection. You're looking for commonalities, things that are going to make them comfortable, because an angel investor, it's not like a venture capitalist that has a fund that can pull from. An angel investors taking their checkbook out and writing you a check from their money. And that's, you know, and of the ones that get, I mean, Chris talked about most of them failing. Of the companies that get money, 70% fail, according to the Angel Capital Association. And a very small percentage really hit the nail on the head. So your relationship with angel investors is a combination of good common due diligence and business sense, just like it is with a publisher. They want to know that you've got your act together, that you're ready to help publish. One of the things, I have weekly phone meetings with the publisher, and one of the things they're so happy with, they say most authors are clueless as to marketing, and they just feel so fortunate that they don't have to explain a whole lot to me, that I can be out there and make myself available, and I know what to say, and do the interviews and things like that. You want the same thing from your entrepreneurial ventures. In your entrepreneurial ventures is you don't want passive investors are okay, you're using their money, but it is their money, and if they're not interested in you, it's sad. They need to bring something to the table. When you're getting investors, it's a two-way street. You're interviewing them. You want to do due diligence on the investor. It's not just a one-way street. And it's the same way with the publisher. It's two ways. You don't want them downstream have some kind of surprise.
You mentioned core values.
Yep.
You and I were together out in Frederick when Jerry interviewed
Scott.
Yeah, Scott Reiser with Yakubak, and he told a great story, and you reiterated it about core values.
Yep.
Tell us about that, and the importance of that.
Well, core values is what you stand for. What is your moral underpinning, so to speak, that people can rely on. You're not going to waver from. If you walked in at the company that this gentleman that Chris was mentioning, his name's Scott Reiser. He runs a company in Frederick, software company. He does a lot of classified work for the alphabet agencies, as they say. But he's got a company, and you walk into the company, and in their lobby, literally in neon lights, are the core values that they live and work by. And you know, it's wonderful to see. And the companies don't just pay, the employees don't just pay lip service to that. I mean, when you talk to people who work in that company, they epitomize those values, and that's what you want. You want to make it really clear that this is what we stand for. Your customers want to know. Your customers want to know that when they pick up your product, it has not just the face value of the product, but it's got an underpinning of some inherent value that is meaningful. And the same with my books. Yeah, okay, there's a couple words I refuse to use, okay? But, all right, there's some heated moments of
Seduction.
Hmm?
Seduction.
Yeah, seduction would be a good word. Well, actually, it's more than that. It's actually, there are some love scenes. They're not, see, this is where I draw a line, like with Larry McMurtry. I consider McMurtry tends to do what I call weaponizing sex. I don't particularly go for that. It's not in my core principles anyway. So we have, you know, I borrowed from the romance, Western romance writers. And, well, what are they looking for? You know, now, no, I'm not putting a man on the front cover with a shirt off and rippling abs. That's not my audience. But
What about the horse's abs?
Hmm? The horse has rippling abs.
Okay.
Anyway, so you want to get that across. One of the interesting things that I found in my research was I was doing a lot of research on the various tribes, the Apache and the Comanche and what have you, and what their belief structures were, and why missionaries, for example, were unsuccessful in converting the Comanches and the Apaches to Christianity. It really wasn't, they blew it. They didn't get it. The Comanche, for example, have a god. They have a great spirit, and they have the equivalent of a devil, and then they have a god for virtually everything except horses and dogs. Go figure. And the name Comanche is actually a Ute tribe word that means enemy. It's kimchi. It's kind of you learn these kind of fascinating things. But so I develop a relationship, because every good Western has to have a relationship between a noble savage and a white man. I develop a relationship between this Comanche chief and my protagonist, Luke Dunn, the Texas Ranger. And it begins out of a hunter-hunted relationship. One is hunting the other, and then the roles get reversed, and then they get a mutual respect, and then that evolves into a friendship, and then it evolves. I've got anyway.
There are several themes that I'm hearing here.
Yep.
Flexibility, adaptation,
Yep.
customer discovery, product market fit, competitive intelligence, competitive landscape analysis. How's all that kind of fit into being a writer? What did you draw on from your business experience that helped you deal with all of that as a writer?
Gotcha. I did a lot of market research. I was a market researcher also in my past.
Can I do one thing? Is it okay if we have some interaction with the audience?
Absolutely.
Okay, so from now on, please feel free to ask questions as they come up. There's no sense in you guys sitting there and trying to remember a question during formal Q&A. Okay?
How did you get the nickname Tumbleweed?
From a cousin, Jim, down in Alice, Texas. When I come to visit down in Texas, I just want to visit as many family members as I can. And so I'm flitting about here and there like a tumbleweed. Seems kind of random. So when he did that, I said, oh, that's kind of catchy. And you're looking for something to differentiate. So Tumbleweed Sagas, here you go.
Are you familiar with Michael Connolly?
Michael Connolly.
Hieronymus Bosch, the television show Bosch that's on Amazon.
No.
You remind me a lot of Michael Connolly because he's written, I'm going to guess, 25 to 30 books now. They're all, you don't have to read them in order, but it makes sense to read them in order.
Yeah.
I can see I haven't read your books, but whatever path that Connolly followed, I think if you follow it, because I think you've developed a very strong character, and that's why that show succeeds. And you've got all that family stuff, that's so cool.
Oh yeah. Well, it's interesting. I read recently a Louis L'Amour novel that was based on, it was published by his son, okay, after his death, but it was based on his experience in the Merchant Marine. He was a sailor for several years before he got into writing Westerns. And what's fascinating is to read this novel about this ship that was carrying a load of 80,000 barrels of naphtha across the Pacific. Like, talk about flammable. Anyway, and some of the cargo's loose, so that makes it special. But I could see the style in that early book about his life as a merchant mariner come through in his Western writing. It's fascinating. The leopard just doesn't really change its spots to a good, and it's good in a good way. And to your point, I found a wonderful resource, and I've got a lot of resources. Sometimes it's really strange how it happens. but there's what they call kind of the folklorist of Texas, a guy named J. Frank Dobie. And he's got 14 books out where he's interviewed cowboys and taken notes that they wrote in journals, and he's compiled it all, and you find out all kinds of absolutely fascinating things. Like cowboys in the Southwest did not wear chaps. They called them leggings. You know, little things. They had a little thing they used on longhorns called tailing. Anybody have a clue what that might be? It's a forerunner to bull wrestling or calf wrestling in rodeos. But basically, you'd get a longhorn that would decide to get a burr in his saddle and take off, and the cowboy or vaquero would, have to go haul it in before it got into the brush and got away. And so they'd ride up alongside of it, and the longhorns had long tails. And they'd literally reach down, grab the tail, wrap it around the saddle horn once, and pull back on the horse, and that longhorn would go womp, and shake it off, and forget whatever it was running away from and go back most of the time. Happened about 90% of the time. There were dangers with that. They have long horns,
So, what you just said about chaps' leggings, okay, and some of the other things, the subtleties, isn't that what I would call that part of customer discovery? Because in order for you to be authentic,
if I have a screw up in the book,
you literally have to get inside of your target customer's head, right, and speak as if you are that character. Am I correct?
Oh yeah. And to your point about Tumbleweed, the cousin that gave me that name, he reviews. He's a gun aficionado, and he makes sure that I'm not using the wrong weapons. Which is kind of, because it's the last thing you want. So I have an 1851 Colt Navy on the front cover. Okay. Wow. Okay, dodge that one. I say dodge that bullet. You get technical review becomes really important. Just like as an entrepreneur, you're looking for validation. That's why you do beta tests and stuff like that. My books, first reader of any of my books is my librarian wife. Whole different. First place is a female perspective, and she'll catch things that I've missed. My editor is fantastic when I ultimately get it submitted, but I got a couple people I send it to for technical review, make sure I haven't really screwed something up. I learned things like I had one gun that I started to use. It's in the first book. Well, it turns out a lot of these were called Walker Colts, and they were defective. They had subject to the cylinders were subject to metal fatigue. Last thing you want is that thing exploding in your face. So you'll kind of learn some of these little things. Whether you're a gun aficionado or not is beside the point. You want to be accurate when you're writing. I have a couple other secrets that I won't mention that somebody pointed out, and I went, okay, well, nobody's going to figure that one out. But whatever. It gets better and better. And each book, it gets very exciting because you're constantly developing your craft. And I want to tell one more story, if you don't mind. The last time I was in Corpus Christi a couple months back and doing promos, and I'm at my favorite cafe in Corpus Christi. If you're there, go to Esther's, the one on Staples Avenue. And I'm sitting there, and I was waiting for a meeting with a friend who's also a published author and a former journalist. And this guy sitting next to me, and I was doing a little dialogue with this waitress, and we were talking about Texas Rangers and Texas, blah, blah, blah. This guy says, excuse me, did I hear you talking about Texas Rangers and the Dunn family? I went, yeah. So he introduces himself, and turns out the night before I was having dinner with one of my cousins, and we talked about this guy's father. I mean, you're talking how many hundreds of thousands of people in Corpus Christi? And here I am, sitting next to this dude. And then the meeting arrives, and it just goes on.
Yeah, could you share a little bit the process of the research and the writing and,
To follow on, you've got not only customer discovery in there, character discovery, you've also got competitive intelligence.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, talk about that.
I talk about what I call a bit of, I call it rewiring the Western genre novel. A little techie, millennialist term. Wherein I use a POV or point of view format, which I'm hopeful is going to be lending itself to easier spec script writing. It's taken from it skips from one scene to another with different sets of characters. And I should add that I have a fabulous narrator, a guy named Cole Tyler, and the guy's just tremendous. One of several that I had to interview. I thought I was going to be the narrator. I got dissuaded of that. That's the first humbling thing that happened. But the getting through, I'm not sure how I want to.
Well, you had research from your family history before.
Yeah, it started there. My dad gave me about 50 pages or so of old mimeographed copies of some material that a cousin of mine who passed away in the 1960s had submitted to the Texas Historical Society that gave narrative vignettes on a bunch of my Texas ancestors. And that's ultimately led, of course, to family tree and stuff like that. But that sat, and I never really touched it until after my dad passed away. Boy, there's a bunch of things I would have asked him if I had really taken that seriously. I was too much into me and corporate America and all that kind of stuff. But I decided to digitize it, so I re-entered the whole thing, and then I passed it around to cousins, family members I knew that might be interested, saying, "Hey, do you have any new information?" And that was really kind of the start. I latched onto a book that was absolutely a godsend by a guy named Red John Dunn, and he's another cousin. He was the son of the first brother that immigrated to Texas, and this guy in 1932 published a book called The Perilous Trails of Texas, and it was his story of when he was a Texas Ranger and then a vigilante, and then he became a farmer and what have you. But his adventures, he got tried for murder a couple times when he was a Texas Ranger. Rangers had a habit of sometimes skipping the trial part of the thing. It was catch and hang. So fortunately he never got convicted, but he met guys like John Wesley Barton. Anyway, that book inspired a lot. His daughter edited it. Her pen name was Lilith Lorraine, and she was a science fiction writer, a poetess. She was poet laureate of several Southwest states, and a suffragette. She was on J. Edgar Hoover's watch list. Her real name was Mary Maud Dunn, and her married name, she married a cowboy out of Falfurrias, Texas, named Cleveland Wright. So her married name was Mary Maud Dunn Wright. Can't make these things up.
Customer discovery, character development.
Yep.
But you touched on the people that you need to surround yourself with in order to get to the finish line. Let's talk about building a team.
My Facebook friends list is about triple. I got a lot of people I've connected with, and particularly now that I'm starting to move towards doing a screenplay, I'm looking at people who are in the film industry. Because I want to support my publisher's efforts. I don't get to go and search for a movie producer, developer, whatever. They're going to have to do it, and so I need to provide them the ammo. But yeah, the network has really grown. I'm probably, I do about one video a week, a little 2-minute shot where I'll talk about a character in the book or some principle I'm trying to communicate. And I put those out. I post it on Facebook and I put it out to, I got a list of about 600 people that I email it to. And some of them then pass it on. I have people on Facebook that are sharing. I mean, it's really cool. And it's certainly, I know for a fact, it's helped boost sales. I belong to a couple of poetry groups still. In fact, I wrote a poem today. I don't have it on me. The poetry helps you when it helps you in your describing, getting feelings and the art of the words into scenes. It tests your metal, if you will. But the people I've been able to connect with, a lot of people have been so helpful in providing avenues to promote the books. I just learned, I was telling Chris on the way up, a page in the library where my wife works said that a professor at Montgomery College down in Montgomery County, Maryland, had my book as required reading in the class. And I don't know who the professor was. I looked at all their list of professors and no name I recognized, but she had overheard a bunch of students standing in the hall and she heard my name and she connected it with my wife and they were talking very positively about this book they had to read, Oasis Justice. And I'm like, oh, how about that? So, here it is. Now that was submitted, the contract was signed in November of 2018, a month before we closed down Mid-Atlantic Angels. It went through editing, narration, typesetting, the whole 9 yards. Actual pre-order starts about 2 months before the book is published. And I mean, this is not unlike a lot of technical products in an entrepreneurial venture. You're going through this process of release. The book actually was released the 30th of July. I have to wait, again, 120 days before I see they can reconcile sales. You get somebody like Amazon will buy 300 books and then will return 100. Who knows? So they have to reconcile all that before they can give you a royalty check. But the next book is, which is Oasis Reprise. It's on the back side of any of those cards that you got sitting there. Comes out February 11th, just before Valentine's Day. And that's a sequel to this. Every book ends with, okay, what's next? There's no the end at the end. And there's probably be at least seven in the series. 5 are complete. Anyway, so I've got dates certain for all these books and their processes. So you're committed to certain dates. Your publisher is committed to certain dates. You're relying on each other relative to that.
Suffice it to say, you couldn't do all of this yourself.
Not the business side, that's for sure.
This goes to what I call the near fatal entrepreneur's disease, a victim. I can
Doing it all yourself.
I can do everything myself.
Anyone self-published here? Fun, huh? Been there, done that. I know what you mean.
I've sold 12 or 9 copies.
There you go. You wind up not having the distribution and marketing part of it, really. It's pretty much what the trap, right?
It costs more to send to Amazon the one copy that they ordered than I'm going to get back.
Yeah. Exactly.
How did you get television interviews?
From the publisher. And then, most of them were from the publisher, but I got one that was really cool. My wife says, it was out of ABC in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And she says, hey, she had seen an author interviewed. And she says, why don't you see if you can get an interview? You're effectively local, Gettysburg, Harrisburg, whatever. And so I sent him a note. and with information about the book. And they said, oh, that sounds really cool. So about a week after the book was actually released, I got a 10-second slot on Good Day Pennsylvania, I guess it's called, Good Day PA, out of ABC in Harrisburg. Delightful interview. And I mean, and then I got a copy of the interview that I could send around, and the publisher put out there to send to distribution sources. So, wow, that's worth its weight in gold. But again, it's that cooperation between you and the publisher. You don't just give them the book and say, okay, run with it. You got to be there.
So, question. History, literature background, obviously keen toward researching and looking at your environment. How did you motivate, and at what point in time did you motivate yourself to get out of the weeds of all of the researching and go into the process of production?
It was a simultaneous process, honestly. And somebody once asked me, do I ever get writer's block? No. It's too alive for me. If you as a writer, and this is probably certainly a lot more for fiction than nonfiction, you have these phenomenally cathartic moments. When the character's crying, you better be feeling sad, feeling the pain. When the character's happy, and so on, the emotions. And it's a wonderful feeling to go through. Part of it is there's just such an incredible wealth of material. And the way the sagas go, they start in 1856, and each book is the succeeding year. So I've got all that went on in that year. Right now, this last one I've written is in 1862. In South Texas, the war between the states, they could have they really didn't care about slavery. There wasn't a lot of slavery going on down there. There was 180,000 slaves in Texas at that time, and they were all up in eastern, the veldt, if you will, the plantations and all that. Very little down, and the Oasis Strip, at that time, you didn't grow a lot of crops. It was grass and whatever. It's a constantly giving fountain of information, and it's just a question of how to bend it. I wrote a scene just the other day, towards the end of the book, of this 5th book. I'm not giving away a whole lot here, but a young lady, she's gotten pregnant out of wedlock. They're going to get married, which sometimes did happen back then. But the baby's coming early. And originally, happiness, they gotta start a family, they're getting married, and so on. And I decided, no, she miscarried. It's too early. It's sad. I look at my own great-great-grandfather. He had 9 kids. 4 of them didn't make it past the first year. And that was pretty common. And I've got a page from the Corpus Christi Times-Caller from 1868. It wasn't called the Times-Caller back then, but it's an actual page from the newspaper listing all the deaths from yellow fever. And 10% of the population of Corpus Christi died. And there were 5 of my family mentioned in that list.
Okay. Let's kind of wrap this up a little bit. The biggest lessons that you've learned that you would like to share with the audience.
All right. When I taught as an adjunct in business courses, one of the things I loved to present was a little Venn diagram and advising students on what they ought to do with their lives, career-wise. What you love to do, that you're good at, that you make money at. Okay? That makes perfect sense. And that's kind of, when you're looking at what you're going to get into, hey, if you're just doing it for altruistic reasons and you're not caring about money, hey, go for it. But when I say it's something that you're passionate about, look, I got 3x5 cards sitting on my nightstand with a pen. And sometimes I can't hardly read my scribbling in the morning, but I'll wake up in the middle of the night with an idea. Okay, and I scribble it down. My wife gets a kick out of me because every time I come out of, when we go to church, I come out and I always have a couple ideas that have kind of emanated from the message. It's kind of cool. And they're sometimes, you wonder, boy, you got that out of the message. Okay, but you never know where the idea is going to come from, and then it's a question of, well, how do I build this in? Now, all the books have individually have a plan, if you will. There's an outline, a general trend line that goes through the books, and those are mapped out in a timeline and what have you. So I can go back, and if I want to, like this third book I'm probably submitting next week for editing. I'm just completing a final review, and I'm doing little tweaks that I've learned from reading and doing the later books, and say, wow, each book gets better, and that's what you're trying to do. It's just like with a product. When you go to 2.1, 2.2, you're constantly, if you're not looking to improve your product, you're going to be hurting the ball player at some point.
Good.
So to wrap up, endurance, passion, and hopefully make a few bucks.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, well, Mark brought a couple of little, not little, but gifts along.
That's the thing over there.
Yeah. And we're going to have a drawing. One of them is a copy of the book. Am I correct?
Correct.
Did you say
The
autograph? Did you say autograph copy?
Well, I got to find out who wins.
Oh, okay.
You want it personalized, don't you?
Yeah.
And then the second is a Nueces Justice Tumbleweed t-shirt, right?
T-shirt, you bet.
Okay, you get to do the drawing.
And I should say that the book copy is what they call a media copy. So it's not the hard, just,
That's my card.
This is for the book.
That's me.
it's right over there.
Go get your book.
Should I get it now, or do you want to sign it when you're ready?
And you get a new bookmark with it too. Hang on, we'll get you signed.
Thank you.
And the other is a t-shirt.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, book cover.
I have a donkey.
Hmm?
You get on a donkey stand.
Paul Reeves.
Yeah, it's me. Really.
Hey, man.
I need this card too.
Okay,
All right.
so 4 questions. What'd you learn? Who'd you meet? What do you need? And how can we help? And please share your learning with your friends and your colleagues. Please tell them about us. If you think that they might get something out of this, we'd love to have them as part of the community. Get on Treble and post your wishes and your offers in real time. Let's expand the community there. And I hope to see everybody here for our holiday party. Thank you all.
Thank you.
I hope you leave here a little more educated, a little more inspired, and a little more connected. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.